He was a hunter of women.
This is the story of two young lives taken by a cold-blooded serial killer.
They found her, and she was stabbed. And I just fell to the floor on my hands and knees, and I just kept rocking and screaming, and I still remember like I couldn't catch my breath.
The terror that took over two New Jersey towns.
Don't go out after dark. Many of the women would bring baseball bats with them.
Investigators willing to try it all before the killer could strike again.
I've got this psychic that thinks she can help.
A race against time and a murderer's compulsion to kill.
That if we didn't catch this guy, he was going to keep killing until we did.
It was hard enough as it was, you know, losing. Excuse me. Just give me a second. Even after 40 years.
Crime Files starts now.
Amie was crazy about fashion. She looked good in everything. She worked in a fashion store. She just had this incredible laugh. I can't think of one person that didn't like her. She was just very easy to be around. She was fun. She was very, she was popular.
It was November 23rd, 1982. Young Amie Hoffman, a cheerleader, a good student, had just wrapped up her job here at the mall. She was headed home. Her mother was expecting her, but someone was waiting, watching.
No cell phones back then, no way to text someone or whatever. When the mall closed, I don't know how much time had passed where the mother became concerned, and unable to call her, she drove down to the mall to see if maybe Amie was talking to someone, after work in the parking lot, and she found the car with the keys in the ignition, Amie's purse on the front seat of the car, and the car door was open. And she immediately called the police. She had put a note on the windshield. The football game on Thanksgiving was always the final game of the season, and it was our last time cheerleading. One of my fellow girlfriend cheerleaders came up to me at my locker and said, Amie didn't come home last night. Massive amounts of kids just hooked up with one another and got into their cars and just started to drive, as if we were going to find her or something. I still remember our coach, and she showed up with these Mylar balloons. She wrote our name on the back of each balloon, and she wanted us to tie them to our megaphones. And she said, I have one here for Amie because I'm confident that she's going to come and show up. But she never did.
Investigators say Amie was abducted and thrown into a vehicle and brought to this secluded wooded area. Amie was sexually assaulted, stabbed multiple times. Her body left in a retention pond.
Detectives in charge of the investigation had very little information to go on.
But an eyewitness got a description of a vehicle and suspects, so police handed out sketches. But the trail was running cold until they got a break in the case. 2 weeks later, a horrifying discovery, just 16 miles north of where Amie was found. Police found a car along the side of the road. It belonged to Deirdre O'Brien.
She was pulled from a car at knife point, sexually assaulted, taken to a rest area, stabbed multiple times in the chest, bleeding profusely, and left on the pavement to die.
When Deirdre O'Brien was killed, things jumped a couple notches. The way it was done was unnerving. The lead investigators started to figure out that we may have a serial killer on our hands targeting women.
She was a fighter, because she didn't die. She dragged herself on her stomach and her hands and knees and knocked on the door of tractor trailers, looking for help and looking for someone to tell what happened, to give information about her attacker and his vehicle. And finally, somebody did answer. No cell phones, so he's on the CB, and he's talking and he's saying, I need an ambulance, I need the police, she's bleeding very, very badly, she knows that she's probably not going to make it. So not only does she give that information, how brave it was for her to do that, to crawl and do that. She's been sexually assaulted, stabbed, mortally wounded. Not only did she do that, but she also gave the trucker a message to give to my parents, one that she hoped would give them some comfort when all this, came to light. I'm not going to share with you what that was, but that's who my sister was. She was a fighter. She was a battler. She was somebody that cared about other people.
When she was with the trucker, she actually thanked the trucker for trying to save her.
She did.
What would you want that trucker to know?
For the bottom of my heart, I would say thank you. That she was not alone because of him at that time. I can't imagine how scared she must have been. And he wrapped her in a sleeping bag and made the call, and then listened to her as she told her story. And I just, I couldn't thank him enough.
You told me you were the oldest.
Correct. Yeah. 25 years is what the time that we had with her. I don't have a lifetime of memories with her. She's been gone for 40 years. I can't even hear her voice anymore. I can't even hear the sound of her laughter. I can't even call it up. It was hard enough as it was, losing, excuse me. Just give me a second. Even after 40 years.
It never really leaves you, right, the loss?
No. She had just graduated from college. She was pretty, she was smart, she was funny, talented artist. She was very much like my dad. She had her whole life in front of her. That was taken away from her.
Even after 40 years, those closest to the case can remember the fear that took over. 2 murders in 2 weeks in 1 New Jersey county. That kind of thing just didn't happen.
It's kind of like a bedroom community to New York City. It's a small town, a very beautiful town, and it is not known for homicides at all. And to have 2 homicides within a 2-week period is mind-boggling.
When Deirdre O'Brien was murdered, we really thought there's something going on. There's maybe a serial killer out there. And it was extremely scary and very real. And it wasn't just our town anymore. It was maybe our county that was also affected, and people were afraid.
The sheriff's office sent out warnings.
And the parents are told, don't let your children go anywhere. We suggest that you don't let your daughters drive at night.
Don't go out after dark by yourself.
If they have part-time jobs, please make sure they're not driving alone.
Many of the women would bring baseball bats with them. We even had the guardian angels from New York come in and kind of patrol some of the malls.
Do not let them wear their cheerleading jackets in public. We don't want anyone to be able to identify them as a cheerleader.
So it was something that had never occurred previously in the history of Morris County.
We were dealing with a serial killer, and that if we didn't catch this guy, he was going to keep killing until we did.
Coming up on Crime Files.
Hysteria was running high in the county, and investigators were running into dead ends. But 2 things changed it all. Some old-fashioned detective work.
I see pictures. It came rolling in, fast and furious.
And possibly a supernatural path. A woman claiming to have a vision. You have to see to believe.
I went through and felt I was doing whatever happened, recreating it completely. The tears, the torture, the rape, everything.
Describing the injuries, that stood out because we knew how savage she was cut. She was stabbed. It was a very graphic scene. When we took her there, she described it to a T.
Crime Files continues with a psychic and a serial killer.
2 murders in 1 New Jersey county in a place you'd see on a postcard. So investigators knew they had to work quick before something else might happen again. So they were willing to try just about anything.
I see pictures. Sometimes they're fast moving, sometimes they're static, sometimes it's like a movie, the whole screen, and sometimes I am so present in it.
I met Nancy when I first started with Mount Olive Township. She had done some work before I came on. The detectives I was now working with had used her and spoke very highly of her. So she was known, she was a friend of many police officers in the town, and the detectives in charge of the investigation had very little information to go on. So we figured, you know, it can't hurt. Nancy's been used in the past, she's been successful. Let's give it a shot.
I worked with the crime victim advocate in New Jersey for 10 years. So homicides, serial killers, rapists, a lot of it is whatever comes because I know it's coming from a higher power.
Nancy's not a regular detective, okay? She doesn't carry a badge, she doesn't have a gun, but she's been around a lot of crime. And she says there's no psychic rule book to follow. She says every case is different, every criminal is different. Investigators asked for Nancy's help.
And so the 2 of them show up at my house. He said, would you mind coming with us? Got in the car and we started going places. So I saw the whole picture. It came rolling in, fast and furious. And one of the first things I felt was he came from Morristown. Oh, his brother ran a gas station, I would say, just as we were driving in the car. I could feel him. I could see the killer. I didn't think she knew his name. And I kept looking through her eyes, and it could describe him. Slim frame, tall, black hair, almost.
And this is all coming to you in your mind. You're seeing it like
Seeing
those
him
movie
clear.
clips.
Seeing him as if he was there. I went through and felt I was doing whatever happened to Amie, recreating it completely. The tears, the torture, the rape, everything.
So is it like you're there with
I
her
am
as
there.
it's happening?
I saw that she was tortured and raped and thrown into the reservoir naked, and a horrific death. Then I could feel he was coming out again, and I was devastated. A few days go by and he kills Deirdre O'Brien. Again, the same thing I see again and again, what happened. Raped, knifed. I kept seeing knife with Amie. I saw how he took her. I saw how he took Deirdre, running her off the road.
Turns out Nancy was discovering clues about the case that no one else would know, except the killer.
Morristown. And as we're going, his name is James, his last name Polish. He lives in the Hollow. He had a car. His brother has a garage. He uses his brother's car. Suddenly I'd say, oh my God, Florida. What? He's from New Jersey and he came back from Florida. The parole board let him out. He murdered somebody, that's how he got to prison, and then he murdered his cellmate. And the parole board let him out to come up to New Jersey to kill 2 more.
It's amazing the stuff that she came up with on his biography that was spot on, you know, before he was arrested.
James Koedatich called police telling them that he had been pulled over and stabbed by an unknown assailant. Koedatich wanted to throw suspicion off himself. The local police came, they interviewed him, they took him to the hospital. He was kept overnight. While there, the police talked to him and said, listen, can we take your card, take a look at it? There's some of your blood there. And from that point on, search warrants were obtained.
May 12, 1983, Koedatich is indicted in the murder of Deirdre O'Brien. So tell me about that moment. The moment when the police tell you that it's James Koedatich. This is the guy, we got him.
Thank God. It's over.
My name is Chuck Waldron. I was a career prosecutor. I spent over 30 years prosecuting criminal matters. And one of the most difficult, challenging, and emotional cases I have ever tried James Koedatich was one of the most evil, dangerous, wanton individuals I have ever been connected with in any of the trials I have done over a 30-year period. I always thought he's very evil looking. His eyes would bore into you. It was almost like a Charles Manson type of thing. And this was shortly after the Manson murders.
And the O'Briens would be tested again and again, only this time by a judge.
And at one point in time, my mother was even removed from the courtroom for showing too much emotion and a concern that she might taint the jury.
Right, so I want to stop you there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so people at home can understand, I want them to really hear what you just said. Your mother was not allowed in the courtroom during the proceedings because the judge felt she might be too hysterical or too emotional. So she had to be in the hallway.
Correct. They were crushed. Deirdre left behind people that loved her. For them not to be able to participate was difficult. It was difficult.
Coming up on Crime Files.
So what would happen with this accused killer? Was the circumstantial evidence enough? Would the jury set him free?
There's no doubt in my mind that we would have seen 1 or 2 additional murders, maybe even more, until the individual was taken off the streets.
You're going to meet with these people and you're going to see it in their eyes, the anguish and the sadness. When you leave, you remind yourself these people deserve justice. They deserve answers.
Crime Files continues with a psychic and a serial killer.
So what would the jury do? That was the question, because it was the talk of the town. Would the circumstantial evidence be enough to convict James Koedatich?
There was no doubt in the judge's mind to the evils of Mr. Koedatich and was firmly convinced of his guilt.
Is there any question for you that Koedatich is guilty?
None at all. I believe it.
Without a doubt.
Convinced, without a doubt.
Well, after 10 hours of deliberations, Koedatich was found guilty in the murder of Deirdre O'Brien. Now keep in mind, he had already been convicted of murdering Amie Hoffman previously, so that case was solved. If he were to be let out, do you think he would kill again?
Of course.
On a scale of 1 to 10 for Koedatich, 10 being evil as they come, where would you rank Koedatich?
At least a 10.
Does James Koedatich have a heart?
It beats. But that's about it.
There might be some people who watch this tonight and say, you're a respected former detective, state trooper, but this psychic stuff, I don't know.
Seeing is believing. If you've seen what I've seen, then it kind of opens your eyes.
Nancy Weber continues to channel her self-described gifts for justice.
I think it's an absolute blessing that I get to do it because we've always had killers on this earth.
How long will you continue to do this for?
Probably my last breath.
But this isn't the end of the story. The O'Briens, despite their sadness and their anger, they wanted to help other people. They opened a children's advocacy center. Deirdre was a fighter. When the incident happened, she was fighting then to get away. And now this place is a place for the voiceless.
When a child's been abused or neglected, you don't want the very system that's trying to help them to re-traumatize them. So a child advocacy center is designed to be a welcome, child-friendly place. Children don't process trauma the way adults do. It's a place where the children can feel free to tell their story.
Whereas Deirdre's house opened in April 1996.
I know when I was speaking to Jim O'Brien about his founding of the center, he said to me, you know, I was struggling to think of why would God do this to my family? And Reverend Giles said to him, you know, where God closes a door, he always opens another one. Every time our doorbell rings and we open that door, we are fulfilling Deirdre O'Brien's legacy.
The center's not the only way the O'Briens gave a voice to victims. They actually changed the law. Because of them, Family members are now allowed to give victim impact statements in court in any courtroom in New Jersey. Just recently, Amie's friends all got together at a 40th high school reunion.
Amie had her own special page, which was dedicated to her. So there's a poem next to her picture that Amie had written, and I believe it was close to surrounding the time before she passed away. Dear Lord, why is there grief in this world that's at hand? I see the pain in my father's eyes as my mother tries to understand. It's really hard to release the people that you love. I wasn't expecting anything to be so beautiful.
If you could have your sister know one thing, if you could say one thing to her, what would you want her to know most?
That I love her, that I miss her, and that I'm proud of her.